to the Nevada Patriot Podcast with Matt Sadler.
Welcome back to another episode of the Nevada Patriot Podcast. As usual, I am your host, and today we want to talk about the presidential primary debate from last night and also touch on a little bit of the Tucker Carlson interview with Donald Trump. My hot take on it. I don't believe that Donald Trump did himself a service by doing that. Now, granted, anybody that's a diehard fan of Donald Trump, or I should say most people that are a diehard fan of Donald Trump, are not going to see anything wrong with what he did. They're going to state the same kind of logical talking points that Donald Trump did by stating, he's up in the polls by 30, 40, and some of them 50 points over his nearest challenger, which might be true. However, the goal of this coming presidential season, and me being a Republican, is not merely to have our presidential front runner win the primary in a landslide. Winning a primary is important, but the end goal is not to win the primary. The end goal is to win the general election. So for argument's sake, let's say 40% of the voting population could very well be set on voting for Donald Trump regardless of what happens. Indictments, bad press seems to only kind of strengthen his base. The only problem is, if you do the math, that base is not enough in and of itself to carry him over in a general election. The benefit he would have had last night in showing up to that debate stage in Milwaukee with the other 8 candidates would have been to appeal to the nonpartisans, to common sense Democrats, and to maybe some Republicans that are on the fence. There's probably not that many when it comes to the matter of Donald Trump. Either Republicans are going to love Donald Trump, or they're going to really want an alternative. So I'm not sure how many of them he could have won over in a debate. But the point is, reaching out to that swing voter, whether they're independent, nonpartisan, third party, whatever the case might be, he has to shore up a base with those folks as well in order to win the election. It will not be enough to continually feed his base the red meat that they're happy with. And I'm not saying I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump. I'm leaning toward Donald Trump already. It's hard not to, based upon how the 2020 election went down, to not give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt and to not support him this time around, because I think he was the rightful person to deserve a second term already. But we don't live in that kind of world of ideals. We live in a real world where there's other challengers. I think Vivek did himself a good solid last night. I think DeSantis was fairly strong. I think the remaining candidates on the stage are either too weak, or they just don't have that wow factor, and they didn't really have strong debate performances. I mean, aside from a zinger or two from blowhards like Chris Christie, it was really not that eventful for the other 6 candidates on stage. The governor from North Dakota seems like a nice guy. Asa seems out of touch, like he'd be running for the presidential primary Republican spot in 1980, 84 or something like that, trying to get a book deal. Mike Pence was trying to be someone who he's not. He's not this aggressive. He just came off as obnoxious. He wasn't assertive. I think that's what he's trying to do. His advisors are telling him, play the tough guy, be this, be that, interrupt, whine to the moderators. He just came off as just whiny, needy, attention-seeking. He just needs to go away. I mean, really, same thing with Nikki Haley. Not impressed with her either. Tim Scott, definitely a good guy. I think he has, his future probably is still lined out toward, congressional, Senate leadership. That might be the path for him cabinet level positions. I don't know that he's ever going to be the guy that's gonna run with the ball as the CEO of our country. I don't see him in that position, although he seems to be pretty grounded. He gave some good solid answers. Still, I mean, I don't think we learned much more during that debate than the two distant challengers, Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis, are kind of in the same pecking order probably that they are. I still think they're running a distant second and third. And by the time it all plays out, maybe their order will change and maybe Vivek will overtake him. But I don't believe either of them have the chops to take on Donald Trump if he plays his campaign properly, if he plays his angle the right way. I think it's his race to lose, basically, regardless of all these phony indictments and the trumped up charges on him. I think that's but with that said, winning the primary, like we talked about, like I mentioned before, it's not enough. It's not enough to win by a landslide in your own primary if you're going to get beat by 5 or 8 points in a general election. Because the way I see it, with the way that voting has changed in our country, with this emphasis on the ballots being distributed, being mailed out through the U.S. Postal Service and whatnot, we leave, whether you want to call me an election denier, conspiracy theorist, call it whatever it is. Call me whatever you want. The elections are not secure if that's the lion's share of the votes out there are being done in that manner, where ballot harvesting, anonymous drops at voting drop-off points at 2 a.m, where someone can dump in hundreds of ballots at a time. That's how can you honestly look at that and say that that's a secure way to handle our elections, which I think, we've done ourselves a big disservice, and COVID was the propulsion of that, or the convenient emergency that the progressives have now used to commandeer our election system. And whether or not you think the Dominion machines on early voting, the electronic machines, are secure or not, the fact that they are connected to a network inherently leaves them vulnerable. There's people out there that make a living on the dark side, on the criminal side of computer malicious behavior, that are way smarter than me, way smarter than you, way smarter than our leaders. So why leave that system vulnerable to that? The chain of custody also, when it comes to that data, from the time that the machines are encapsulating the voting from that day to when they get reported, if some counties are leaving their information on flash drives, and then the flash drives are you're just leaving all these different mechanisms by which there could be errors in the voting system there. So, like many of the candidates mentioned during the debate, like Donald Trump mentions, like our officials here in Nye County, for instance, proposed and actually were ultimately successful with, was going to paper ballots. Now we do it countywide here in Nye County, which is good. I'd like to see that nationwide. You point to examples of European countries like France that by and large still do the paper ballot system, and they can get election results way faster than we can. What do we have? We have early voting, we have mail-in voting, we have electronic voting, and then still we don't know who our presidential victor is until the wee hours the next day at best. It's frustrating. And then you compound that with all the malarkey going on in places like Arizona, Wisconsin, Georgia, with the way they're tabulating the votes, and mysterious camera failures, or people being pushed away if they're poll watching, or if they're kind of watching the counts and things like that, being told that they have to stand a million miles away where not even a bald eagle can see what's going on. How can you not think that things can be somewhat rigged? So in that regard, my heart does go out for Donald Trump. And then if you just look at the numbers, if you look at the logistics, if you look at the empirical data, Were our lives as Americans improved during his presidency? Absolutely, they were improved. I think by across the board. And you can always find some outliers who did not benefit from his economic policies, but by and large, almost every American was helped during his administration. We didn't have conflicts in other areas of the country. We didn't have Russia, North Korea, and China kind of going off track and getting out of line. I have no other way to say that. Kind of getting out of line. I hate to equate Donald Trump as like a disciplinarian or the kindergarten teacher kind of keeping the class in line, but that's what he did. That's what he did, and we were respected, like he mentioned in his Tucker Carlson interview last night. We were respected on the international stage, excuse me. All these leaders, whether they loved us or whether they love Trump or they love Americans or they love our culture or our music or our sports, they respected us, and that has gone by the wayside. So we're hoping that we can get back on track. But like I said earlier on, and I'm imploring the president to stop seeing the end game as dominating the primary, as beating his opponents, Ron DeSanctimonious or whatever he calls them. That's not a good consolation prize for him. It's not a consolation prize for us Americans who want change and we want our way of life back. That's not him winning in the landslide in the primary and then getting beaten by that bag of bones president we got there now, or worse, Michelle Obama or Kamala or Gavin Newsom or whoever it might be. What good will it do if he destroys DeSantis and Vivek by 20, 30 points apiece? It's going to mean nothing, Whether you lose the championship game by 30 points, a point, 2 points, 5 points, you still lost. Second place is the first loser. So hopefully Donald Trump will keep that in mind. Want to thank you for listening to this special quick post GOP presidential candidate debate program on the Nevada Patriot podcast. So until next time, folks, God bless you and have a safe, nice day. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Tell a friend and join us next time. After you catch your breath, check out the NevadaPatriot.com for more content, advertising opportunities, and to give listener feedback. That website again is the NevadaPatriot.com. Until next time, Patriots, stay American.